Okay. We can do that. Okay, so welcome again, everyone, to our Tuesday, January 3rd meeting of the Administration and Public Works Committee. We'll start with the first item on the agenda, which is the roll call.
Chair Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Clark. Here. Councilmember Edens. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper.
Here.
Councilmember Jaxie.
Here.
And Councilmember Nyhan.
Okay, thank you, Carla. All right, moving on to the agenda. Next item, approval of the minutes from the December 6th meeting. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes by Member Farmer and seconded by Councilmember Clark? Are there any questions or comments related to the minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are. All right, we have one abstention, but the minutes are approved then. We'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak up to 5 minutes. And please fill out a card if you have not done so, or if you are watching online, please make sure to use the raise hand feature so we can identify you. Carla, do you have any speakers?
We do. We have 3 cards at this time. The first being Jim Boland.
Thank you. All right, good evening, council members. Happy New Year. Won't take much of your time this evening. I'm just here to speak on one issue. As you know, I don't frequently come to your meetings. Just once in a while, if I feel like there's something that may warrant a little explanation, and this is one of those this evening. So this concerns the charter provision relating to the retention and separation, potentially, of our department heads. I did put this in one of my mayor's reports a few weeks ago and gave my reasons for a recommended change. I'm going to get to that change in a minute. But I thought what I would do is, if you didn't receive that this evening, is just sort of go through these and try to list them in priority as to why I think this should be changed. Now, the change that I'm recommending that your committee consider as a recommendation to the council, and it would ultimately be recommended for the council to the voters in the April 2023 election, is to make this decision solely the decision of the city administrator. And here are my reasons for this recommendation. First, if the council and the mayor are going to be involved in approving of the retention, hiring rather, and then ultimately the retention and potential separation of department heads, then that means to do that job effectively, I would submit that the council and the mayor should be aware of applicants for the positions, because how else could you make a decision as to second guessing the city administrator and hiring if you haven't seen those? Similarly, you would want to see performance reviews, because how could you make an effective decision as to whether to separate or discipline an individual, whatever, if you haven't done that? And those don't occur and probably can't occur for practical reasons. I think most importantly, or at least equally as important, it in my opinion, hamstrings our city administrator. Ultimately, we as elected officials, we hire the city administrator. The council makes that selection and the mayor has to approve it. It's the reverse of all the other appointments. And I would submit that we are either comfortable ultimately with our city administrator or we're not. And if we're comfortable with our city administrator, then we, I think, at least in theory and in practice, should not have concerns about wanting to have our hands in the retention and separation of department heads. And if we don't have confidence in the city administrator relative to this particular item, then we should get a city administrator that we have confidence in for it. I think also having these 2 officials of our city, the department heads, or more potentially, be subject to the will of elected officials runs the risk of putting them and potentially their decisions in the political realm, i.e. potentially having political issues be referenced and considered relative to their decisions, and I don't think that that is a good idea for the city. I guess lastly, I would say that the structure, from what I understand from speaking with our city attorney, that we currently have is not consistent with most municipalities. As I mentioned, we have the built-in mechanism already in place with respect to the hiring of our city administrator that's done by elected officials. So for these reasons, I would respectfully ask that you forward to the council a change in our charter for recommendation to the voters in the April election to make this decision where it should be, with the city administrator that we retain and fire if needed. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Carla, do you have another speaker?
James Vanek.
James Vanek, Ward 7. Good evening. First of all, I want to thank the city staff for selecting the roundabout at Ridge Road as one of the projects that's going to recommend to be submitted for federal funds this year. Due to the proximity of Ridge Meadow Elementary and Rock Hollow Trail, the community has always seen this as a very important piece to making Old State safer. I sometimes struggle with ways in which I might encourage you all to support these projects, which my community sees as essential. So let me try this analogy. Imagine, if you will, that you have a toxic waste site in your ward, and that the agency that is responsible for the cleanup is so poorly run, it either doesn't have the funds or doesn't care about making things right. Speaking for myself here, if I heard that another ward was having this issue, I would completely support city helping in any way we could to help that one ward or wards, as it may be. I want you to all know that we view Old State seriously as our toxic waste site. It's narrow, windy, steep, sharp curves, no shoulders, no guardrails, steep drop-offs. Not to mention, it has ridiculously designed intersections. It has killed some and left many with lifelong injuries. Sounds somewhat humorous, perhaps, comparing Old State to a toxic waste site. But don't kid yourself, this is how seriously we view this problem in my side of Wildwood. How you vote tonight will kind of determine whether how I view Wildwood, really. You know, do we all come together to solve a problem, or do we turn our backs on certain wards and say, well, it stinks to be you, but we don't use the word stink. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. And that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla, do we have another speaker?
We do. Lou Salomon, please.
Lou Salamone. I operate Suburban Bow Hunters Nuisance Deer Control Group. I want to thank the committee members and city officials for this opportunity. I'm here tonight to ask for the opportunity to present at the next meeting. It'll probably take 15 to 20 minutes to present my proposal for deer management, and then question and answers could follow. I did send stuff in the past, but I need to prepare for something different. If I had known that all I had to do was email the committee chair and maybe get on the agenda, I could have did that for this one, but I did not. So is that a possibility to get on the agenda for next meeting?
Is that, oh yeah,
That's
you're
the
asking
question.
for,
Yes.
yeah, we use this time for public comment, so it's not for two-way dialogue. But we can
So-
certainly follow up after the meeting.
Okay, and I could email you to get on the agenda for next one. Is that how it works, the committee chair?
I would say, let's discuss because there, maybe if you wait tonight, when we get to the discussion, you'll see what next steps are. And
Great, thank you.
Carla, do you have any other cards?
That is all.
Okay, thank you to all the public speakers for tonight, for coming tonight here. So, and I know that there were, three items that the speakers, spoke in regards to the, charter provision, the federal funding application and the deer management. So, I think we could probably, if there's no objection, just address those first in the agenda, and then that way, we won't have to have the speakers sit through the whole duration of the meeting unless they want to, so that we could accommodate that. I do know first speaker, the mayor, is not here right now, so I guess we can keep that where it is, but maybe the item pertaining to the, let's see what it's officially called, the recommended projects for federal funding, we move that next to address, and then the deer plan, then at least that way we'll get those items off the list here. Any objection? If that's okay, can I just get a motion in a second to readjust the order of the agenda? Okay, made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Bertolino. Any questions? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, the order is adjusted there. So with that, then let's move to the item regarding the recommended projects for the federal funding applications. And I will pass that over now to our Director of Public Works, Rick, and City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Chair Garitano, council members. Did provide to you a memo summarizing 3 projects that the department is recommending for federal funding applications for this winter. The deadline is coming up next month. So there are 3 projects that I think you're familiar with that already have been considered or in progress in design. The first one is the Old State Ridge Road roundabout, as we've put in applications previously for, and I think that recommendation is consistent with your prior meeting where we discussed Old State Road. So we are recommending going forward with that application as a joint application with St. Louis County and the city of Ellisville. We're recommending the cost to construct overall funding application cost to be 2.5 million. So the local match would be 20% of that, or 500,000 divided into a third would be our local portion of that match. So I would caution you that we haven't had an opportunity to follow back up with St. Louis County, and we need to do that with Stephanie Leon Streeter to get confirmation that they are interested and willing to participate in this application. So we don't have that yet. We did talk to them last month. So I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to add anything to that or not.
Thank you. No, Director Brown is correct. We do have a verbal commitment from the city of Ellisville, given the dollar amounts that we're talking about here with the 20% match. We believe that the city of Ellisville would probably pass this through their council, but it does hinge on the county, because if the county chooses not to put it in their budget and participate in this, then the dollar amount required by the city of Ellisville and the city of Wildwood would probably push it over the edge. So, but we do need to follow up with them. We have a meeting. Rick and I have a Zoom call later this week on a different topic, but we can perhaps see if that gentleman has any input. Otherwise, as Director Brown just mentioned, we'll follow up with Acting Director Streeter and see where they stand.
Okay, Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, just a quick question, Steve. You said that it would push it over the edge if St. Louis County doesn't agree to participate. What did you mean?
What I meant by that is the local match of $500,000. If that were split in $250,000, I am not convinced at this point that the city of Ellisville would put that much in. So sorry, I didn't clarify that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Edens and then Farmer.
Yes, are any of these three projects also available for any of the funds from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act if this fails, or even simultaneously? Because the east-west funding uses two other mechanisms that don't overlap.
So council member, so the other two projects, I didn't have a chance to really talk about the other two, but the other two are the bridges down Wildhorse Creek Road near Austin Fort. So we are recommending Bridge 386 also be included this year. And the idea there was essentially from what I understand is there's going to be more monies available in this round, in part from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So my hope is that Bridge 386 essentially would get funded this time in this application, effectively through that funding, that additional funding that is available. The other bridge 387, we talked about, I believe, the last meeting, that's the bridge further to the north from Austin Fort on Wildhorse Creek Road. We want to reapply for funding on that one with the thought that it's eligible. And when we reapply, we're going to reapply for a greater dollar amount and address some of the increases we've seen in costs over the last few years and the anticipated future increases due to inflation. So the other two bridges are again 386 and then 387, the two structures on Wildhorse Creek Road, just north of Austin Fort Road.
Okay, and then going back to Old State Road at Ridge Road, as you were initially talking about, would it also be possible to get a guardrail cost estimate for the curve where there was a fatality? My understanding from the last council meeting was that was something that my colleagues and I would like to see. And if there was the potential to cost share with Ellisville or the county, or just eat the cost outright if it would be affordable, regardless of this moving forward.
Councilmember Edens, the location of the guardrail, you're talking on the southern portion of Old State Road, I believe, down there. And that is the topic of conversation that Director Brown and I will be having with MoDOT on Thursday of this week. We did talk to them after the last committee meeting. They had to do some research, so we're going to hear where they stand on that topic on Thursday.
All right, Councilmember Farmer and then Hopper. Okay, Councilmember Hopper, you're up.
I just had one question, and I'd actually like to make a motion, but do we, for the roundabout at Old State and Ridge, if it came down to, obviously we would have to have that conversation, but if it came down to just us in Ellisville, I mean, do we have realistically the flexibility in the budget to be able to split that cost in half with just us in Ellisville, or are we then going to essentially be over a place that would be fine, we'd be financially able to do anything?
And if you don't mind, if I can add on to Councilmember Hopper's question, because that's might help formulate maybe the motion that maybe Councilmember Hopper is going to make, is just remind us, what is that date that you need to submit the application to? Because I'm trying to think if we have another opportunity to talk about this, if let's say Ellisville says they can't do it, if it's just them and us, or do we have to make a motion that provides some flexibility if this council is willing to do it? That's what I wanted to add on. So I'll hand it over to the director now.
So as far as the schedule, the challenge is that we have to submit the application before the February council meeting. So it's due on the Thursday prior to the second Monday. We would have an admin public works meeting prior to the submittal, right prior, but I couldn't get council action on anything because the meeting would be held after we submit. So the January council meeting is pretty much the final opportunity from my perspective.
Okay, so that was my part of the question. Councilmember Hopper, did you have something else that you were looking for, or is?
I did not hear, I guess, the first part of that as far as availability in the budget. What
Yeah, I
flexibility we
think-
have there. Sorry, it cut out before that.
Nope, I think that still needs to be asked if we know that part yet.
That, assuming this project were approved, that would be a 2027 project. That goes beyond our current capital budget, so it would be built in. So we don't have it in our current plans. I'd like to make one note that, as everyone here on this committee knows, that we have submitted an application for this roundabout twice and to the East-West Gateway, and that has failed both times. And we have submitted it under two different cost share. One was a 20%, one was even a 50%, but it still failed. I'm a little concerned with the numbers as being presented now, showing a cost share of 20%. As you know, with other federal programs, the higher the cost share, all other things being equal, it gives us a greater chance of perhaps getting that award. This one has a number of things working against us, as we have seen through East-West Gateway in terms of the priority of this intersection versus others. But I'm a little concerned if we went in at 20%. So these numbers may change. I think this is a discussion that certainly Director Brown and I need to have. And if it's a 50% cost share, that changes these numbers significantly too.
So I wonder if we approve a motion that gives you some flexibility, because right now your recommendation assumes Ellisville and the county, and if that does not come true, then you really don't have a motion to move forward with, because this is what we're approving. So I'm thinking we have to have some kind of flexibility because of us running close up against the clock there, and getting something to council that would be the best possible solution there to make this work.
If I could ask one more question around that.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, so my question then, maybe I'm misunderstanding what how you're explaining it there, Steve. So I apologize. So when you're saying the cost share, you're talking about we would need to change the overall 20% total cost share to 50% is what, in your estimation, would be what would make it more successful. So I guess my question was, I was thinking more along the lines of if it was the 20% and the county decided not to be a part of it and Ellisville did, are we comfortable splitting it two ways rather than splitting it three? If it's going to go to a 50% cost share, then that's another financial conversation, I guess, which if we have that room in the budget, honestly, at this point, if we can make some progress on Old State, that would be great.
Council member, so if one of the scenarios is that the county chooses not to participate in this, and the cost is shared strictly between the city of Ellisville and the city of Wildwood at a 20% cost share, that is $250,000 for each. That's probably doable for both parties, probably. And again, it's a 2027 project, so it's not in our current numbers, not only for 2023, but the 5-year plan as it exists right now. But at $250,000, and again, this is up to the council. Neither Director Brown nor I get a vote on this. So if you all approve that, that's a number that we could handle. And I believe that probably the city of Ellisville could as well. But I will say that from my standpoint, my personal standpoint, I'm a little uncomfortable with going in with a 20% cost share. But again, I think Director Brown and I need to have a little bit further conversation, because that will weigh in about whether this would be approved by East-West Gateway. That will be a factor to be considered.
So if you have to have a conversation, though, I guess my question then again comes back to that window of when we can do this, right? So if you guys are taking it back and have a different conversation, and then it comes back at the next admin and public works meeting, then we're unable to move forward this year.
Well, let's do this if it's okay with the chair. I'm giving you my personal opinion. perhaps Director Brown, might want to share his opinion as to why he's showing the 20%. And his approach may be more valid than what I'm saying. You want to?
Well, I guess basically it's a starting point. And it's certainly subject to discussion. And if we increase the 20 to say 50 or 30, it will increase our odds. So that's always been the case, and that is still the case here. So if there's a desire to do it, if the committee gives us some leeway and says we can go up to a match of X dollars, that might be an appropriate window to say either we increase the 20 to whatever percentage, or if the county does not participate, it gives it wiggle room. So maybe that's a suggestion that you could consider. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. So then if we,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize, but I
No,
would
go
say
ahead.
I would say that at this point, given the discussions that we have had with Ellisville and even the initial discussions we've had with the county, I would say a number, certainly with the city of Ellisville and the city of Wildwood, the cost share that each party would put in should not exceed $300,000. I would say certainly from what I've been able to ascertain from my counterpart in Ellisville, I think we get much above that, and they're going to have some heartburn. So, but again, what we don't know, the unknown is if the county is going to have some budget dollars to be able to participate in this. That I'm hopeful that Director Brown and I can get an answer from the acting director of MoDOT, from St. Louis County this week.
So if I could maybe suggest, just to give that theme of flexibility, maybe we don't lock ourselves with any numbers, because this group will still have to vote in council. And so let's not lock ourselves into that, because if we're just a little short, it might be enough for the council to feel comfortable to still make that work. Just because we don't have another meeting for us to review it and still get to council. That's what I'm thinking. Just give you the most flexibility possible so that we can try to make this move forward. Councilmember Bertolino, you had your hand up.
Right. I was going to move that we accept the recommendations from the Director of Public Works and move this to council and approve the recommendation.
Well, that recommendation has hard numbers in it. So that's why we're talking about maybe just without locking ourselves into the 20% here.
I really appreciate that, but I'm also saying we're also talking about a lot of speculation here about what ifs and what are they going to do and not do and so on. We have no idea what the Fed's going to do and what else is going to do. Whether you put percentages or numbers, I think is got to mox next. We're going to try again, and I would think that if the federal government comes through and says, "Yeah, that's a good proposal," I got to think that's got to have a lot of weight with Ellisville to come through as well.
No,
Well, it's
Let me-
what
well,
comes first, the chicken or the egg.
I did-
I mean, we're not going to go in unless we know if the county is participating and if Ellisville is participating and at whatever. I mean, we have to know those answers before we make application by February the 7th.
I would just say move forward with getting, and I apologize. I know Councilmember Hopper also mentioned he wanted to make a motion. So Councilmember Hopper, was your motion aligned with what you just heard here? I didn't want to skip over you. I know you have your hand up there still.
And then Rick can add some clarity to this, because whatever the motion is, that
Mhm.
there can be a change to that when it goes to council. So
Yeah.
Rick can explain that one as well.
All right,
So,
let me
yeah,
ask Councilmember Hopper. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think my motion was definitely going to fall in the line of providing the flexibility of moving forward with these applications. In particular with the Ridge Road, but if we have to with all of them of not necessarily saying that we're locking to a number until conversations happen outside of that, but before it would come to council, obviously you would have specific numbers on what we'd be voting on. But I think moving forward into researching these applications and getting that process started is my motion without locking it into a specific dollar amount.
Councilmember Bertolino, are you all right with that? He's okay with that. So if there's no objection, then can we entertain that was Councilmember Hopper and then seconded by Bertolino on that? And then I'll hand it over to you to add any other additional commentary.
Well, I guess the point I probably should have made before was my thought process on this would be to proceed with the discussions with Ellisville and the county, and depending on what we hear and what their response is, we would, when we take it to council, we would have to make adjustments accordingly, and you'd be apprised of that at the council meeting. So if there was changes, you would certainly be informed of that to vote on it at city council.
I agree. I think we will be able to trust it at the council level and those of us here. Carla, do you have that motion? Okay. So I think we've had lots of discussion on this. Is there any question or does anyone need clarity on the motion? All right, Councilmember Farmer.
So I'm happy to support giving you guys all the flexibility you need to try to make this work. I guess my concern is that we've already done this a couple times, and unless I'm not understanding fully what I'm reading here, this doesn't appear to be that much different than what we've asked in the past. So I guess my question is, why do we have any greater level of confidence than we've had in the two previous ones that have failed that this is going to do anything different?
Okay, Director Brown or City Administrator, do you want to take that one? I know Director Brown's given me an answer on that before, so.
Well, do we have any higher level of confidence? My answer would be no. My answer would be that there has not been any significant change in the crash statistics or anything else related to that particular intersection that would sway East-West Gateway to arrive at a different decision. The only thing that potentially could help is there's more money out there. And so potentially, but again, when we've heard in speaking with St. Louis County, you know, I mean, this project has scored extremely low when compared to other projects that in the opinion of St. Louis County, as there are intersections throughout the county that there are hard and fast statistics where there's multiple injuries, multiple deaths, all sorts of things, that this is way down on the list of priorities. It's happened twice. Right now, other than maybe there's more money available, I'm not sure that we have any statistics that would show anything different, but we're going to give it a go. Would you say anything different?
No, I would agree.
Okay, Councilmember Farmer, you have a follow-up and then Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, so then I would just maybe suggest if we can, since we're going to try to get this thing to give you guys a level of flexibility with this, when you're having a conversation or your conversations with the counterparts that we're talking about, I don't know if gauging their level of interest or whatever if there's something that you guys think would push this over the line, and that could be nothing, I don't know. But if there is something, I think I would have that conversation rather than starting at the bottom and then all of a sudden realizing that we have a much bigger number that we have to deal with. Because as we have discussed on a few things, our partners in Ellisville partner on a handful of things, and they've got a budget they've got to work through too, as does St. Louis County. So we've got a lot of interests involved here, and getting everybody on the same page to say, hey, this is something that we want to get done, I think is important before we just waste another 4 years waiting to hear back from the federal government that this thing still scores low. I mean, I'm happy to support it, and I am certainly happy to support the other bridges as well. I just, I'd like to put our best foot forward if we can do it.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, so we were talking about the 20%, and I just keep going back to this. If you're thinking that higher number is going to give us more leverage on getting this to pass, what, based on history and your knowledge of making these applications before, Stephen, Rick, what would you suggest would put us in more of a to make it more attractive to them to give us the money?
The reason that we say that is just based on our knowledge of working with East-West Gateway in terms of and trying to get money for federal grants. And anytime the city of Wildwood is able to step up to the plate with a higher percentage of the local match, certainly, positions us better to perhaps, all other things being equal, to be able to get that grant. Because if we're saying we'll put in 50% and we're only asking for, in this case, this is a $2.5 million project, so we're only asking for $1,250,000 versus 2 million at 20%, that might, again, all other things being equal, that might work in our favor. Whereas the other folks that are competing for those same dollars might be asking for, are saying we're only going to put in 20%. So it's always better if you can put in more money. But the caveat to this is, to answer your question, what would put us in a better position? A 50% match would put us in a better position than a 20% match, because that's less money than they would have more money than to be able to fund perhaps other projects. The issue with this particular project, as I said earlier, is that the statistics, the hard statistics, money aside, we have not scored enough points based on the scoring of that East-West Gateway attributes to this project to be able to, no matter what the dollar amount is, even if it was an 80% local match, it doesn't score high enough for them to say, we're going to fund this project versus some other project in St. Louis County. That has been the bugaboo for the 2 previous attempts for federal funding. Rick, did you add anything to that?
No.
Well, I guess my follow-up is, from 20% to 50% is quite a jump. So are you saying that that's how much we would have to jump to make us more attractive?
I think anything greater than 20% will make it more, it'll score higher because we are putting more, the ask is less is the bottom line. Since you're chipping in more upfront, you're asking for less money, therefore you're going to score higher. We just don't know what that number is. It's just not knowable, frankly. You could do 30%, you could do 40%, you could do 50%. The issue here, as we've talked, is it's not just Wildwood. We're talking about the county and Ellisville also contributing on that match. So it's not just us. That complicates the issue, unfortunately.
And the higher that match, and again, in our previous conversations with the city of Ellisville, their comments to us in the past have been, we'll chip in to a certain level, but this is, in their minds, this is not a high priority project. They have not shown a real strong desire, based on the feedback that we've gotten, to really want to push to fund this project. Most of that roundabout is in the city limits of Ellisville, but they personally don't view it as some big issue. So we might be able to get them to go 300 or so. At least that's the numbers that we've kicked around in the past. But I'll tell you, the big issue has to do with St. Louis County, about whether they're going to, when we talked about it at the beginning of 2022, it was a flat no from the county, that they weren't going to participate in any way, shape, or form. They did not have any money. We've gotten in conversations that Director Brown and I have had with their acting director. She has indicated she's cautiously optimistic that they may have some dollars in this budget, but they might be able to participate.
Okay, so I'll just make a comment in here. I'm going to strongly support the application. I totally agree with Steve. St. Louis County should be stepping up. We pay a significant amount of real estate taxes in this city towards St. Louis County, and we do not get our money's worth from St. Louis County. And so we need to put the pressure on them. The residents need to put the pressure on the county. And they're supposedly, I think they're still coming to the next meeting, or we invited them to come to the meeting. When we have a council meeting, they're supposed to come to, I think, get an update on the mayor's request, that report that he had asked for. So I had asked at the last council meeting that we invite St. Louis County. Old State in general is not a safe road. And even since the last time we had a council meeting, there was an accident on the 24th. There was an accident on the 29th of December. And then there was an accident also on the 30th. One of those accidents included a car going off the road Another accident was down closer to 109. So they're in different parts. And then one of these accidents did occur at the Old State, where this proposed roundabout is. There was some minor accident over there, but there's still, the safety of the road is still very questionable for me. And I think we need to put the pressure on with them. Rick, two quick questions for you. I think in the past we've applied under safety, but isn't this time the intent to apply under a road application?
Well, we've applied under the traffic safety portion of the application, and we'll have to look at that again to see if that makes sense. It's very difficult, and as we've talked in great detail, the thing is the project doesn't really fit in a firm category. There's not the crash history, the pavement condition's not poor enough, and it doesn't alleviate congestion. So it doesn't really check any of the boxes well, and that's why it doesn't score very well.
But I think if we look at it on the road, it might be a different application. And that was what I was thinking we would do better. And I know that
Well-
ties into, so yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Well, I guess the point needs to be made is I was pretty certain, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we've talked to the county, one of the avenues they were considering was at some point applying and lumping this project with resurfacing of the greater corridor. And I think that was still what they were considering when we spoke last with them in December. So that might be a possible avenue. We might find out more on Thursday.
Now, I know one of the measures to determine the quality of the surface of the road is something called a Paisley rating. And I think it's on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. Is that something, have you been out there to look at that and assess it?
Well, yes, that is what is required of us to submit with the application. And we haven't started looking at that again to see if it has gotten any worse or to what degree it might be considered worse than last year or 2 years ago. But that is something we would be looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I've got. I think we've done a lot of discussion on this, and I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak. So we do have a motion on the floor, and Carla, do you want to repeat that motion since it's been a while?
Just relative to the Old State Road at Ridge Road roundabout, recommendation is to move forward with the application process.
Okay. I think that keeps it with the generic flexibility there for Rick and Steve to bring to council, then something that has specific details for us. Councilmember Clark, did you have a question? No. Yeah, we had Councilmember Hopper and seconded by Bertolino. All right, so seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that motion passes. Thank you. And we are going to move now to the next item on the agenda.
Do you still not want a motion for the other items, the other bridges as well?
You know what?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that.
That
I'm
makes
ready to
sense.
jump ahead. We talked so much, I thought we covered the whole topic.
Actually, then we pieced out one for more flexibility. So then what I would like to do is make a motion as recommended for items number 2 and 3. That's Bridge 386 and Bridge 387.
Okay, is there a second on that motion? Councilmember Clark, a second on the motion. Let me open up and see if we have any questions or discussion on this motion pertaining to bridges 386 and 387. All right, seeing none, then all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, the motion passes. Now we'll proceed to the next item that we had reordered on the agenda, which pertains to the deer management plan. And you want me to take that? I'm happy to do so. Okay, so we do have this item on the agenda, and as you may all recall from the last December council meeting, we at this point right now have not moved forward with either the option which was with White Buffalo, or at this point anything else. So it was to come back to this committee here, and one of the items that we have talked about is just properly resourcing this from the Department of Public Works perspective. Rick will probably can speak a little bit to it, but you know, we had some discussion of either bringing in Brand Wentling, who was a member of the committee in the past, the deer committee, who may be able to come in and help, and we do need that, someone to coordinate and organize for us. So that's the logical next step when it comes to the deer management plan, and we have some time built into the schedule to work through that, put together that comprehensive plan. And, I think everyone still intends that we want to look at a multifaceted, different layered approach. So it would include the intention, include the white buffalo, but also bow hunting component. But those details have to be worked out, and that's what we need, is someone to be able to do that for us. So I want to pass it now to see if I've missed anything else from that update there. Rick or Steve?
Mr. Chair, no, I think you covered it pretty well. As we all know, the timing did not work out with White Buffalo to be able to do anything this year, or at the end of 2022 or 2023. So that gives us a little bit of time to, as the memorandum that you sent to the committee and the council, that it was your recommendation that a well thought out plan, an all encompassing plan of the various components of a deer management plan be memorialized and brought back to the council. And I think that's why it was kicked back to this committee here. You did bring up the fact that the Department of Public Works Director Brown, the intention would be that he would be the point person for this project. It logically falls within his department. We also talked about and we have approached Brad Wendling, who was part of the subcommittee of the Board of Public Safety, who was quite knowledgeable on this subject and has indicated that he would be able to help out in the development of that comprehensive plan. He's again a lot of knowledge and would participate in the implementation of that plan under the direction of Director Brown. So at this point, then we just need to, and we have some time because we're early in 2023. Nothing would be happening. I think White Buffalo, from their perspective anyway, would be doing something either end of 2023 or beginning of 2024. But it's probably it would be a 2024 expenditure. We could put it in the 2024 budget, whatever that becomes. So the question now is just developing setting up a time frame and checkpoints to develop that comprehensive plan so that we're ready to go later in the fall of this year, and certainly have that plan put together. So I think it would be assuming that this committee agrees with that approach, then we would move forward and set some timeframes for Director Brown and whoever else he wants to bring into that project to develop that plan, the comprehensive plan as you laid it out to the council.
So I'll open up to see if there are any questions, but I think for us, maybe the next step, maybe an update at the next meeting. If we do have Rick, you have that resource there committed that we could move forward, or at least making progress toward getting that done, so that this way we can keep this moving forward.
We can certainly do that and have it on the agenda. I know that Mr. Cross was intending to follow back up with Brad Wendling here very soon and engage him in more detailed discussions.
All right, Councilmember Edens.
Yes, my microphone's rocking tonight. Sorry about the extra noise. Can you redefine or elaborate on the word comprehensive plan? I ask because we passed what was a draft management deer plan. And so I just want to make sure when you're not saying the word comprehensive plan that you guys aren't saying, let's disregard all the work that was done, the votes that took place, and just rewrite our own plan, that it's more of a timeline about how to administer the plan that we've already approved so that we're not reinventing the wheel.
Good question.
Yes.
And a very good point to bring up. When I say that, I'm merely referring to the memorandum that Chair Garetano sent to the committee in terms of because again, this is coming out of this committee in terms of how he envisioned a plan, which was taking the deer management plan, a lot of good work there, a lot of ground has been set, but also layering in to that bow hunting and the timeline and how all this would come together. Now, Chair Garetano, I don't want to put words in your mouth because you authored that memorandum to the council, but that's what I took when you described in your mind what you envisioned as a comprehensive plan. But
Yeah, I would say maybe another word to replace that comprehensive, an executable plan. You know, something that dictates like a project plan timeline in there. What the work that Dr. Rambo put together, I think provides the business case, the justification, the scientific background. But we need something that has specific dates, resources, and who would be responsible for those types of work.
I guess the issue is most of those dates come from bids and availability from companies which we already had. So I don't know that it's necessary to get a whole other plan other than an internal, goal and follow-up procedure with former Sergeant. Don't want to call him Sergeant Wendling in place, because really, I mean, reading the original plan that we passed, it already included an archery component in the future. So I mean, we're back to the bidding process. We're back at looking at White Buffalo. We're back at another population count if we wait for years. So I just don't want the work we've already done to be disregarded.
I don't think the intention is at all. All right, Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, I agree with what Councilmember Edens just said about the deer, the archery component is already there in the report. It wasn't really a plan that Dr. Rambo put together. It was more of a report. And in his report, he showed through a number of means how the archery component would fit in. And I think that is what at least I voted on, was to do it that way and not come back and start adding more things in, but just to take what he's got there as a report and put it in a timeline and our milestones and our measurables and our goals, the list of all of the things, the bobs and the wows, are the best of the best and the worst of the worst processes, and finding out how to make sure that everything worked. And yeah, I wouldn't want to start back from the beginning again and start saying, well, let's add some more things in, because we already voted on it.
Yeah, I don't think that's the intention at all. I think it's just someone actually has to do the work. Like there's, the details, like how do you get permission from a property owner, right? We keep making this assumption that we're just going to hire White Buffalo and they're just going to show up, or if we get archers and they can do that. But who negotiates with these property owners? Who makes sure that we have all the legal aspects covered, right? All these things, these things all have to be figured out, all these details. And that's not into that level of detail in the plan right now. And so we need to get to that task level of someone doing that work.
Could I follow up with Director Rick? If you're the point person on this, so if there's something we can do to help with putting all of that together, and we're here willing to help, or if you want us to send you ideas, or like we've done in the past with other projects, please let us know.
I appreciate that. I'm sure you all will be very much involved in. I don't intend that this would be discarding really anything that's been done. It would be pulling it all together and adding detail and nuance to it primarily. So I would expect you to be very involved in reviewing anything that's been modified or amended or tweaked or added. So.
Okay. So Rick, I think we have that next step that you've got there. I don't think it's necessary to us to do a motion on that. I think it's just obvious what we need to see at the next meeting. But, see if there's anybody who has a different opinion about that. Otherwise, we can move forward. Okay. All right, so now we'll resume the regular part of the agenda. So we're going to go back to administration under for information. So we have an update on accessibility on the item, just a standing agenda item. Just make pause and see if Councilmember Clark, do you have anything else you want to update the committee on? Okay, no update then at this time there. So we'll move on to the next item under for action, which is the city administrator search process timeline. So the process next step, first of all, thank you very much to Councilmember Farmer for reaching out to the council for feedback on their thoughts regarding the city administrator, and then to Councilmember Bertolino working with city staff that reviewed the position description there. And so thank you for doing that. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to ask only because I'm having a little bit of trouble with email this today, is if you can get that description emailed to the committee just for one final review there, then if there aren't any other pieces of feedback that come back from that, then the next step would be to get that position posted out there. But that would be the next step there, you know, after we just get it out in front of everyone here to review. Councilmember Bertolino, you got your hand up?
What we worked on wasn't necessarily the description, it was the advertising.
The advertisement, that's what I meant then. Yeah, the posting. Yeah,
And I would like to, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to echo our HR director and my thanks to Councilmember Bertolino for his help. We three of us sat in my office and fleshed all that out, and I think we came up with what I consider to be a very good posting. And so thanks to the council member for his help.
okay, thank you, and thank you for your help. So Councilmember Clark, did you have your hand up?
I did. Didn't we speak about having additional meetings to just to make sure that we got this all taken care of? And if so, when will we have another one?
So we did talk about having additional meetings at this time. We don't have any on the schedule, but there will be some that will be coming here, because one of the things that we talked about previously is that we have to accelerate our timeline. Ideally, we want to target to get this completed by April. So we will very likely have those opportunities. But that's what we're trying to do, is save some time with emails by sending it out by email to the committee and getting your feedback that way.
So I guess Councilmember Clark, you're referring to the fact that I retired as of December the 30th. Officially.
Yes, and
I think December 30th was the date.
having retired myself, I know that when you retire, you want to retire.
Well, I appreciate your help there. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for getting that out to everyone. Get it out by tomorrow, and then again, seek your feedback. And I would say get it back any feedback by Monday. And then if, you know, depending on if there's any feedback or if everyone's in agreement, then let's get that job posting out there. Okay. Then that moves us on to the next item here, which is the social media policy. So I'm going to ask city administrator if we're going to cover this, or if this is something we want to get the city attorney to be available for.
No, I can cover it. But I would ask that the next item on the agenda, the review of the well, it says the review of business and liquor license, but the city attorney would not be available or is not prepared to talk about the business side of it, but he did. And as you saw, there was an attachment to the agenda to discuss the liquor license. Mr. Young had another meeting to attend at 6 p.m. He was hopeful that that would be done by 7 or so. So if we get to the next item and he still hasn't logged on, if we might be able to push that to the back of the agenda to allow him to come online. So I'd ask that when, you know, if we could change the order there. But for now, I'll go ahead and talk about the social media policy. Most of you have been on this committee long enough to know that we've talked about a social media policy for a long time. It's been on the agenda. We took a run at it, actually, a previous council put it on the agenda. For reasons that may not have been the right reasons to have a social media policy. I'll leave it at that. A gentleman was hired who was the son of a resident who then did in fact prepare a social media policy. It was reviewed by this committee. This goes back 3 years. It was not a policy that would anything that the city would adopt. It was not comprehensive enough. So that was put to the side and nothing has really been done. In my conversations with City Attorney Young, it is very, very important to have a social media policy that encompasses the responsibilities of city staff, as well as city officials, as well as elected officials. There was an attachment, a 31-page attachment, I might add, that is a very, very good document. This has been put out by the International Municipal Lawyers Association, IMLA. And I don't know if you all had a chance to review it. We didn't get it attached, until kind of late in the game, but it's very comprehensive. It would take some tweaking to incorporate it to within the city of Wildwood, but for the most part, it covers a lot of things in terms of it gives teeth to this policy. If the policy is violated, as you all know, having a social media policy and anything having to do with communication, you have to be very, very careful about First Amendment rights and what you can't muzzle people. You can't, stop them from saying certain things. But in a social media setting, from a website to what we do, I mean, we use Facebook and we use Twitter and we use Instagram. And so we need to make sure that there is a consistent voice. If for any of you that read it, it makes reference to a social media administrator. I would envision that person to be Tom Lee, who is, as you know, is our economic development / communications manager. So I hired him for this role to handle all of our social media and all our media posts for that matter. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I guess what I would ask, respectfully ask from this committee is to move this forward. We can tweak it and so forth, but I'd like to see if you're all in agreement with the concept of a social media policy. We can edit this. Like I say, it's pretty comprehensive. John Young he's the one that provided this. This is used in other municipalities. He feels very strongly that this is a very, very comprehensive and a good document. So I'd like to at least, if nothing else, get approval from you all to let's move forward and to ultimately adopt a policy, this kind of policy going forward. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Councilmember Edens, please.
Yes, I have some questions and comments. Not surprising. I was here a few years ago when we took a first stab at this, and it was rough going. And I do remember the issues with the initial policy that was presented. Some of the issues that we've dealt with before has been, I think falls into the cracks. I don't think there's a way for the city to police it or prevent it, but was one of the initial reasons why we looked at a policy besides needing one for other types of employees, et cetera. We have had former elected officials post fake social media accounts impersonating the city, impersonating other employees with grotesque, I would say, misrepresentations of those individuals that went beyond funny political commentary and was impersonation. The other issue, right? So, I mean, I've gone to Missouri Municipal League lectures on social media ethics, and I'm sort of that weird millennial, and then I might as well be 80. I don't have TikTok, I don't have Instagram, I don't have Snapchat, I don't have whatever else there is. I just don't care. I have a Facebook campaign page that directs you straight to the website. It just is basically a place to post another link. The first comment I would make is that I'm not sure that we have appropriate elected official training in place so that individuals understand record retention if they are doing an active social media page as an elected official, because there's a difference between a personal page, a campaign personal page, and an official elected page. And a lot of times what happens is people start merging those things. And sometimes it's because you knew your neighbor and they knew you personally, and then you got elected. And sometimes it's because you never really made two separate accounts. And so you're policing free speech in a way that you shouldn't. My other concern is, right, so let's say, I mean, because personal pages are personal pages and we're not trying to wade into that water. What do you do with somebody that's an elected official or an employee that isn't supposed to be conducting business from a personal page, but does it anyway? And they just say, I'm not, because we can't force a city social media administrator to be granted access to a personal page. Right? Because they can have their privacy settings so that only friends or friends of friends or whatever the social media in question uses as terminology can restrict that viewing. So the problems that we had before is basically with people also just, no other word for it, lying. And so what do you do with that, right? Because it's the people using their pages inappropriately. And when an administrator says, hey, please don't do that, they're just going to say, nope, that's my personal page. So are we going to take somebody to court every time somebody says, I can say that, that's on my personal page? I mean, how are we enforcing this?
All good questions.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got more too. So.
Well, I think that just to
Yeah.
keep it germane to.
Yeah.
We unfortunately, this policy only pertains to within the walls of this city. So anything that happens outside, I don't know that we can really.
no, we really
get
can't.
into that.
But it did include, I thought I understood official media
It does.
pages.
The-
That's what I'm saying. So if I have an official Facebook page that I manage on my own, and I kind of merge that with my personal page, how do you,
It's one or the other. That's it.
but not if somebody.
Well, here's what this policy addresses. Number one, if someone out there is creating those fake Facebook pages and saying inappropriate things, we can't control that. That's social media. That's the bad about social media. So they can do that. This policy addresses what people should do. People will need to read this, and they will need to sign a statement that says they have read it and they will comply. And that will go into a file, be it an employee or an elected official. There are remedies in this policy that if an employee violates this policy and does things that are inappropriate, they're subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. As it relates to an elected official, if they violate the policy, either through even a personal page, but if they're saying bad things about, because those they may have a personal page, but those personal pages are not that's public information, and we can find that stuff out. So if they're doing inappropriate things and subjecting the city to potential liability for whatever, then they're subject to being censured and other, I don't remember the exact language in here, but they can be removed from office by violating this policy. So there's teeth in this policy for people that violate it. Again, freedom of speech, but again, people can't use and go on and start saying personal things. If they're representing the city, they have to have a disclaimer. There's a lot. I mean, this is 31 pages of whole.
I read it.
Okay, so you understand that there is teeth in here that we can hold the employee or an elected official's feet to the fire if they violate sections of this policy.
I do, except for where the authority comes from for some types of proof, right? Because not everything is public. So what happens when I'll just, Joe sends you an email and says, hey, council member Edens, said something political. I didn't get a screenshot of it. I heard it from a resident. And then you say, you know, Councilmember Edens, I'd like to see your page. And I say, no, it's private. Then what happens?
Well, at this point, you know, I mean, we can go in and go into a whole lot of specifics about, well, what about this situation? What about that? We don't have a social media policy right now. This is a good start. We can tweak it. We can get into those kinds of specificity in terms of how do we enforce this and that, and we can even have Mr. Young be part of that conversation. What I was looking for, I mean, this is just presenting it to you all and saying, is this something that we want to do? Which I'm hoping that this committee agrees to, and then we go forward and tweak it or whatever, and then ultimately it becomes part of the city's documents and everybody's required to follow it. That was my hope for tonight, without getting a lot of those details, because those are all good questions, but I don't have the answers to every situation that might occur.
Right, and I'm not asking for every hypothetical. It's just if when we pass something, we should know if we can be able to follow it ourselves. And so I'm, you know, asking those things because I would want to know what I'm being held accountable to. And my other question is just the way that the definition of social media is presented in this document. I get it. It's fluid. Social media is like whack-a-mole. A new one pops up all the time. You can't just list companies. We can't keep up with that. We have to provide a general concept. I'm with you on that. My concern is later where you talk about mentioning the city or providing a link. Technically, I think a service which is professional like LinkedIn would qualify under social media because of content sharing and because messaging can occur. So did we provide enough of a loophole for, you know, elected officials and other types of employees to be able to, you know, post information about where they work without, you know, any blowback for using, I mean, not that there would be a logo, but there might be a link to the city website or something like that provided.
You know, maybe what I could suggest, because there's a lot of really good questions here, and maybe we just need to get a list of all these questions and have the city attorney review them. Just because we could probably slice it and dice it in many different ways.
Sure.
So, you know, I just think that, you know, there's still a lot that, you know, it might be helpful if we compile those questions and then have the city attorney and city administrator look into those.
Yeah.
Just because I think.
I will type them up. I will type them up. And I'm just using just general examples, you know, technically, I mean, it's personal. It is nothing to do with business, but a dating app fits the social media profile that we have on here. And so what happens if, you know, I have seen weird things on social media. I've seen people create fake profiles, debate somebody else to get a quote to then publish the quote in the time that I've been on council. What happens if somebody fishes another employer, an elected official, gets a quote about how they feel about an employee, the legislative process, et cetera? Well, then technically they violated the policy, but it shouldn't because it's a personal dating app. So there's all kinds of things we need to consider. So I will type it up and put it in.
And that goes for everyone. Councilmember Burley, you.
Yeah, I was going to recommend we and make a motion that we do basically three things. One is, since we just got this today and some of us have read some of it and some of us read all of it, I would recommend that we put this on the agenda for the next meeting and prepare our questions as Lauren has indicated. Prepare all of our questions and get them together and make sure that Attorney Young is with us. Okay. Present those to him. And then at the next meeting, put it on the agenda again and say, John, come back to us with a edited model that fits the questions or answers all the questions that we've come up with. So basically 3 times, let's put it on the agenda and let's get it nailed down by that third one.
Okay. By the way, City Attorney Young has joined us. We just heard what you just said. So.
Oh my God.
No. Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. All good suggestions. So yes, if you all have some specific questions or some concerns about this document, please send them to me and I will get with City Attorney Young and we'll be prepared to discuss those at the February meeting.
Mr.
So we
Chairman,
got a motion. Yes,
This is John Young. Sorry for getting on late. I've heard about the last 5 minutes of conversation or so. And I did want to, I don't know how this was introduced. I'm still interested, introduced it properly. But I do want to just say from my perspective, I'm presenting this to you in the fashion it was presented as a model that I received from the International Municipal Lawyers Association, is this concept of a social media policy has been floating around the city probably for about 4 years now. And obviously, with the review of this document, so you've seen it, and just the fact that it's 31 pages, that is an incredibly broad concept. And my reason for sending you this model ordinance wasn't necessarily to adopt it as is. And frankly, there's been some case law that's been developed in the 8th Circuit since this model policy was drafted, but mostly just to identify what you as the committee would like to see implemented in a policy conceptually. Like I would say from the most important perspective is really the city official and employee run social media and who's allowed access to it, who's allowed to post things on it, those type of things. I would say that would be concept of importance number one. But everything else, I just want to get an idea of what you all were looking for. So I just wanted to interject briefly and kind of give that explanation. So I appreciate the time.
Okay. All right, we have a motion made by Councilmember Bertolino. Just checking, do we have a second on that? Councilmember Jaxi seconded. Councilmember Clark on the motion.
Yeah, I just want to say that I do support going ahead and doing something with this, because looking over both the 600.010 through 070, whatever it is that we have now, it needed some updating anyway. So to look at this is you know, I have notes all the way through it, but it's got a lot of things that we don't need, but it's got a lot of things that give us some good ideas about what to put into to make what we've got better. So I think that it's a good idea.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, then with the motion on the floor, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, no one opposed, abstains. The motion passes. Thank you for that. Then the next item is regarding the review of the business and liquor license amendments. And I will pass that over to our city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then I, in turn, I'm going to invite City Attorney Young to, if he would, go ahead and discuss this draft ordinance and the reasons behind it.
Thank you, City Administrator. Members of the Commission, what you have before you is a proposed revision, and it's a wholesale revision of the city's liquor license ordinance. The city's liquor license ordinance really hasn't been revised for a long number of years, and there's been significant revision at the state law level on liquor licensing, to the extent that the city has fallen behind to a certain extent on the number of allowable and extent of allowable licensing for the sale of not only package, but also on-premises consumption sales of alcoholic beverages. So the intent of the draft ordinance is primarily to bring us up to speed with state law, which also brings us up to speed with a number of our neighboring communities. A lot of this was born out of comments from some of the city's existing businesses and wanting to get licenses that neighboring communities have that the city just currently doesn't allow because of its ordinances, because they're out of date. So really the primary impetus of this draft is to modernize the city's liquor license regulations. Now, I also want to bring up a couple of major conceptual changes in not only the process, but also the impact of the regulation. Number one it is drafted such that the approval of liquor licenses no longer goes to the city council. I'm suggesting this as a change because this is like any other license that is issued by the city and is truly an administrative decision and should be applied consistent with the ordinances, application of the provisions of the ordinance. So the idea would be that there would no longer be public hearings on every liquor license out there. It would go through an administrative process and it'd be approved by the city clerk, similar to a normal business license. Obviously, zoning is still going to go forward before you. So if there's a location that requires liquor sale, that would be a conditional use permit. You're still going to get an opportunity to review that through a public hearing. It just wouldn't be required to go through it again for the liquor license. Another aspect that is a significant change and is a suggestion, but I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion. So in terms of, and it's drafted and presented as a suggestion for consistency with the intent that this not go before the city council any longer. So state law currently provides that if anyone asks for an application for a liquor license for a premises that is within 100 feet of a church or school, that it can only be approved if it is brought forward and approved by the Board of Aldermen or the City Council after a hearing and notice provided to the churches and schools within that 100 feet. The city currently has a provision that's substantially similar, but increases that distance to 200 feet. Now, what I'm proposing is just simply a 200-foot ban, period, with no exceptions. To say if it's within 200 feet of a church or school, we're just not going to have a bar selling alcohol within 200 feet of a church or school. Now, if you feel, no, we want to have those and review those on a case-by-case basis, that's fine. But also know that state law is 100 feet and the city increases it currently to 200 feet. Now, you could do it where it's banned at 100 feet and then have a hearing on a case-by-case basis for anything from 100 feet to 200 feet. So I just wanted to raise that as another conceptual change that's in the draft that's before you currently. Also, because of the changes in state law, some of the times in which intoxicating liquor can be sold have increased. So it can be done earlier on Sundays, such as the grocery store. I know Dearborn's has been asking, hey, when are you going to change the law? Are you going to change the law? Which is part of the reason why we're reviewing this. Also, it allows for catering permits to be issued and tasting permits to be issued, which are currently not something that's generally allowed under our current ordinances. So that, in a nutshell, are the substantive significant changes. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, Councilmember Berlino.
Yeah, John, the copy we got did not have any of the changes in red. So what you just read off is kind of like, okay, I didn't know that was a change. Is there a chance we can get a copy of this with your recommendations in red?
I can provide you with recommendations in red. The reason I didn't is the whole thing would be red.
Really?
It's that much of a change. Now I can give you a summation of, because ours is so outdated that the whole thing would essentially be red. I mean, we really redrafted the whole thing.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Edens.
Okay, question, but first a comment that reflects, I think, how perhaps outdated our licensing system is. There was a business, and I won't say which one, but you can probably guess. And there was a event where there was going to be lots of folks gathering in the city town center area. And I said, are you going to be open on this date? And it was no, our license doesn't let us sell alcohol normally on this date and it's too confusing for customers why we can't sell part of our inventory, but we can sell other things in the store. So it's just easier to close than to disappoint customers. And I thought that was pretty sad. My question was actually on the definition of microbreweries. And so the reason why I ask is because when we have done surveys for community members, they have come back and said time and time again in economic development, we would love to see something like a microbrewery in our town center. At the Missouri Municipal League Conference, and I know I've mentioned it a couple of times tonight, and we do have our former president chairing the meeting of the league. They had an entire lecture devoted to microbreweries because they have become centers of towns for meeting, culture, and arts, more than just a place that sells alcohol. And I thought, well, 10,000 barrels for a legal definition sounds a little odd to me. So I just started Googling out of curiosity, and I think it might be a little bit low. For example, when I looked at Schlafly, which is a regional producer that has 2 locations, they're producing 30,000 barrels, and our policy is for locations of less than 10. Now that's split between 2 locations, but my concern was, would we not grant we'll call it mid-size microbrew license, because we're saying they're not a microbrew, and maybe they would be more appropriate for, I guess it would be the industrial area of zoning. And we would lose out on a potentially a very good business that has a low footprint and an excellent restaurant. And so Attorney Young, where did we get the 10,000 from? And is it not reasonable to raise that?
It's a statutorily defined term. It's defined in the Missouri liquor law.
Does it differ state to state?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why Sam Adams says they're a microbrewery.
Right.
Interesting. Okay, so then how would we grant a license for something like an Urban Chestnut or a Schlafly? Because we're not considering them a microbrewery. Just as a restaurant that sells liquor? Or, I mean, I just don't want someone like them that could fill town center to be schlepped out into an industrial center where they'd be, instead of being a restaurant that serves people.
Well, you got to remember that it's based upon the license and the location and the premises. So if the premises is doing less than 10,000, they can qualify. So it would just be a separately licensed premises.
Yeah, the locations I'm thinking of are not. They're considered bottle works, and so they're doing more than that. Would it be a CUP process? So somebody that wanted to do more could appeal, or would it just be there's no way to appeal it?
Well, I mean, if we're conflating the issues of zoning and the liquor license laws, I mean, from a zoning perspective, we can do whatever we want. I mean, you can define it, you can increase the barrel production and add to that increase in the barrel production a requirement that, 50% of revenue come from food sales or something to that effect, like the old bar restaurant definition that used to be a statutory concept that no longer exists. So there's ways of doing that from a zoning perspective, sir.
Yeah, I would just.
This definition doesn't necessarily affect the zoning regulations.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay, that's what I was trying to. Because if something wasn't
licensing purposes.
Okay, so I'm still wondering if maybe I want to amend it in the future to a higher barrel, but I think maybe what I would want to know is what somebody like Maplewood does, because they're a historic community and they have a bottle works right downtown. And I don't know that 50% of their income would come from that, given that they have cases and trucks and other things.
Yeah, I would say that from a licensing perspective, I don't believe we can increase it because frankly, We can't call them a microbrewery and them not be able to get a state license for the same product.
Okay. Okay. So it's really more of a zoning question.
Yep, I think so.
Okie dokie. Thank you. Clear as mud. Oh, one more thing. There's just one small clerical error on page 23, section C. There's 2 periods at the end of the paragraph, and I can't spell it all, but I did notice 2 periods.
Yeah, I caught that. Megan showed that to me today. And I will say anyone who caught the withdrawal versus withdrawal on a later page, I caught that as well, and you'll have a revised draft. But thank you.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Thanks.
All right, Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. Firstly, I have a number of questions about going through this, and I misspoke before. I was thinking the number for our code for the other issue was 600, but this one is 600. But anyway, this has changed so much. And you were talking about making it solid 200 feet from a church or school. And I'm wondering if we could put in there something about from school, I don't know, school activities, but like we have the new outside school classroom at a local elementary school now at Pond School. And there's some things that they do. They have class activities outside of the school. Is that from where the school activities or classrooms end to the point of the 200 feet? Or is it from the front door of the school building?
We do define the measurement in the code. If you give me just a moment, I'm about to stop my car. And when I do, I will pull out the code section and take a look at it and read it to you for what it says. But we do define how the distance is measured. Because like I said, the state law has a comparable provision, but based on case law analysis of that.
Okay.
Oh, John, are we losing you? John, we don't hear you. If you hear us, we've lost you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're waiting for John to reconnect. Teresa,
Yeah.
do you, is it a number of questions or?
I do have a number, and I was going to ask if we could do the same thing with
Wondering if it's-
putting those together and sending them, because I have a number of things that in this document, if this is the document that he wants to go forward with, that I would.
I think that would probably be a good way to work through that. You know, if again, the administrator compiles it and you kind of create an FAQ of question and answer, then at least coming into the next meeting, we've got hopefully a lot of clarity already, and then we can jump into detail. That might help, just because we may have lost him, you know, it's not basketball tonight, though.
I'm here if you can hear me.
Okay.
Well, John, you know, Teresa, and I know I've got a couple too. We've got probably enough questions that, you know, would probably take a while to get through. And we're thinking, just like the other topic, that, you know, if we can send all our questions to Steve Cross, he'll compile them and then send them over to you. And then that way you can kind of provide back responses before the next meeting, sort of like an FAQ document that would hopefully address, and you know, the questions might be the same questions I have that you have. So hopefully it sheds a light and helps us move through this more efficiently.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And again, the reason for presenting this was I just wanted to make sure you all knew what you could do in the context of being consistent with state law. And obviously, if the city wants to be more restrictive than state law, it can be.
Okay, so we're gonna then
Councilmember Clark, just for your, I'm sorry, just for your reference in reviewing the distance, it's on page 22 at the very top, the first subsection B.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay,
Certainly.
so you know what, why don't we just get a similar motion like we did the last time? Councilmember Jaxi, you okay? You want to make a motion that basically states that we'll compile all questions and send them over to the city administrator for review and responses back to this committee prior to the next committee meeting. Is there a second? Councilmember Clark. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, so now that moves us into Public Works. We don't have any for information items. So the first item is under for action. It is, yes.
Under for action and restriction B4.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. I missed that there. So the item regarding the review of the charter provision relative to the city administrator department heads. We have that item here. Is there anything you want to add to that, or you want me to?
There's nothing I need to add.
Yeah.
I think the mayor pretty well covered it all in terms of why he's proposing this change to the charter.
The mayor spoke to that earlier during public comment there, and also details were provided in his memorandum. So at this point, the committee can certainly discuss it, or if there's a motion to be made. I think if we want to consider this for the April ballot, we probably need to move according to the timeline, which means we probably need to get this to council next
Monday.
meeting.
If it clears this committee,
Okay.
then it would be on the agenda for Monday's council.
Okay, so an appropriate probably motion would be the motion for the city attorney to prepare language for the ballot item with regards to the city administrator and the ability, I guess, provision relative to the city administrator and department heads. We'll leave it like that. Councilmember Edens.
There's not a motion on the floor yet, but I would make the motion for the wording to come back to the committee first, simply because it's been like this for years. One more year isn't going to make that big of a difference. And because it's something as big as a ballot measure, I would want to do the work at committee and not do the work at the council meeting, because it doesn't really make a big difference to me whether it's this April or another April. And so I'd rather just do the work in the committee.
Right, I'll provide a different opinion if there's, I would only say because we're going to be in a point of transitioning city administrators to kind of start the slate clean with whoever that person comes into the new role versus having to go through this process of having the city council to the approval. So I'm kind of flipping it
Well,
around.
just to
Yeah.
clear, I guess you could answer my question then, because technically, I mean, we could not have somebody hired and we could still be in a transitioning phase when this is officially becomes law. And so it may still be under the current city administrator's purview and administration as a law and not for a new one. Right?
I don't know that he plans to stay here that long.
Well, I know, but best laid plans, right? He's still at this meeting, so.
To answer your question, yes, if it went through council and it went on the ballot and it was approved by the voters, then yes, it would go into effect whenever that goes into effect after the April ballot. So yes, that then would change and give the city administrator and me as the incumbent, then I would have those powers to do, for the two directors and be able, because again, all personnel decisions are made by the city administrator, all personnel decisions, but somewhere along the line, the charter was written so that those two positions in particular, the city administrator cannot hire or fire the two director positions without, I can make the recommendation,
Right.
but with council approval. But yeah, if it passed, then, and if I'm still here, then yes, I would have that authority.
I guess because we're not further along in the hiring process, my thought is that we're in no particular hurry. I mean,
We're going to move as quickly as we can through that hiring process because I know someone wants to be retired. But Councilmember Bertolino, unless you have anything else. you want
well,
to say.
no, just, I mean, when we've tried to rush through ballot measures before and not rush, I mean, things other council members have said is, you know, we're too close and we won't be able to educate the public and we don't have any time to talk about the issue, and that's what's been said before, so, I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want something to fail and be set up to fail, so.
Well, the tax item, for example, that failed recently again in one of our neighboring cities. But I think another example would be the one where we changed something that was very administrative and it passed by over, I think, 2/3 in the city with hardly any communication. Because I think the voters were able to read and understand it. So I think it all depends how it affects people, right? Does it affect them directly or does it affect them in their wallet, or does it affect them more from just watching their city government operate? That's my opinion. Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, Steve and committee, I put this proposal under the heading of be careful what you ask for. I think in the current situation with our mayor and with our excellent city administrator and a very congenial council, this would work perfectly. But we've all been through years when that wasn't the case. I would very much be opposed to moving forward and changing this and taking the power away from the council and giving it to an individual. That was not the intent of the charter originally. It was not the intent of the people who formed the city originally. And again, I appreciate what the mayor is saying. I think he does an eloquent job of putting case forward, but we're looking at a pretty rose-colored glasses situation right now, and not one that really is challenging to the authorities. I think the city was founded on the fact that there is control and strength in the council, and it has a weak mayor and city administrator. That was the original setup, that this council was really be in control. So that's why it's 16 people as opposed to, 4 or 8. It tries to be very transparent and have a lot of input from its council, but the council remains the authority. I'd be opposed to moving this forward on those grounds.
Any other questions or comments? I mean, I would say if that would be the case, then I think then at least the council then has to be a part of every process, every review, because if we're responsible for making those decisions, we have to be apprised of what's going on. Otherwise, we're basically being asked to comment or opine on something where we don't know what's going on performance-wise. I think we have to be more involved in that, but that's why I thought the whole authority was to give it to the city administrator.
I hear what you're saying. I didn't know that's where you were going. I was going to agree with Mr. Bertolino. Council member, sorry, Bertolino. I appreciate the mayor's comments. I've lived in and worked in many positions where I had multiple bosses. And I appreciate having a single boss and can appreciate why I would want, if I were in the city administrator's shoes, would want to have those authorities. But I also, to Councilmember Bertolino's point, believe that when this was passed, the idea was to retain at least those authorities within the council to make those decisions on those two positions. And I'm guessing that the council at that time decided those two positions are so critical to the city. We want those decisions for hiring and firing to be made at this level. So I guess I would not be inclined to change it at this time either.
All right, any other comments? Okay, any emotions then at this point? It seems like the consensus is at this point not to change it unless something changes. So I don't, Councilmember Clark.
I suppose I would make a motion because I don't understand it enough yet that, or I I have thought about this, but I can see both sides at this point. I would make a motion that maybe when's the next time we could vote on this? Could we do it in November or something? Or is
I think there are several options available. I think it all
Maybe
depends
late-
on. when-
maybe because, right now, this is like too quick to have to, it's almost like you've got to do it now or not. And so I need more time to discuss this and think about it and understand both sides. And after hearing some of the things that were said, I just need more time.
So maybe a motion to postpone it at this point to just for a future date to be determined.
I think so, yeah.
You want to make that motion then?
I do want to make that motion.
All right. I guess we'll keep, I'll be happy to second just a motion to keep it open and we can address it at some point. Any other question or discussion on the item? All right, all those in favor of the motion to postpone, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone oppose or abstain? And the motion passes. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to Public Works. We do not have any for information items. We'll go on to for action. The first item is the RFP for the residential solid waste hauler. So Rick, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Garitano, council members. We put the issue of Waste Connections back on the agenda for your consideration tonight. It was last discussed, I believe, at your August meeting. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion about their performance and how poor it was, quite frankly, at that time. And so there was, I think at that point, a motion made that we should start the process of considering bringing on or being in a position to bring on a new hauler quickly in case the need was there. So following that meeting in August, we actually had a meeting with Waste Connections. And then very shortly after that, their former division manager was let go. And they brought in a new individual, Mr. Ben Tucker, who had previously managed their landfill operations in St. Louis. So that occurred sometime in September. And I guess the short answer is since that change and transition occurred, we've seen some gradual improvement in their performance. And I provided you, I tried to hand out some documents to you. So I gave you the summary of complaints. These are just the general number of complaints that we have received for Waste Connections, and it dates back to 2020. But I did want to highlight the improvement we have seen in the numbers in November and December. Frankly, it's transitioned dramatically as of late, and I would say that the performance has been acceptable more recently. There's been weeks where we haven't thought about it. We've not got a call, and it's the way it should be, frankly. So we have seen, I think, from our perspective, some vast improvement in their performance. So I wanted to bring this back to you and say at this point, if we are to move forward with bringing on a new hauler, then I think the appropriate thing would be to advertise and put a request for proposals out on the street and start that process. I think, as you know, the current contract started in August 1st, 2019. It was a 5-year agreement, had initial period of 2 years, and then had 3 one-year renewals. So the renewal period is August 1st. So we are approaching, I guess, year 4 of 5 coming up this summer. The renewals are per the agreement of both parties. Waste Connections has a six-month notice requirement, ours is 3 months. So theirs is coming up in February 1st, I believe. So we're at the point of making some decisions. And so I think if it's the desire of the council to move forward, then we can put the RFP on the street in relative short order and get some good information for you to consider. I don't really like the idea, frankly, of doing that unless we're serious about changing haulers, or at least seriously considering bids, because it does take these folks significant effort to put together a proposal. And they've got to track down costs and get contracts, quotes for things, new equipment and that kind of thing. So it is a significant amount of work on their part to give us a proposal. So unless we're real serious about considering them, I really don't want to go down that road. And I think we've said before, and so I'm sure Steve will back me up. It's not our position. I don't think that we feel it's necessary just yet. And it is a lot of hardship on our residents when we change haulers. So it's not a decision to be taken lightly. So I don't think we're in the position, Steve and myself, of recommending it. But if you feel strongly, we can certainly move forward with that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you all, I guess, for any questions or comments.
Councilmember Berlino, any?
Yep. Thank you. Rick, if Waste Connections exercises their 6-month, which would be what date? You said February?
Yeah, it's February 1st.
Would that give you enough time if we then had to go out for bid in February? Is that enough? Is that enough time if we decide to make a transition? I guess I don't know where I'm like getting at there, but it seems like we either hedge our bet and go out and get bids now and then, but have to be serious about it because I see representatives from other haulers out here. And if we're not serious about it, then we shouldn't go out for bid. But I'm kind of concerned that yes, Waste Connections has made some improvements the last couple of months, but they've also put the gun to our head a couple times. And that still doesn't sit real well with me. So I'm kind of leaning on your professional judgment as to what you think we should do here.
Well, I think Mr. Cross would probably want to weigh in as well, frankly. The preparation of the RFP can be done in relative short order, and I think we would be prepared to do that, whether it's February 1st or January 15th. I think that's my position, is that I'm going to be ready to do that if that's what we need to do, whether that's your desire or if Waste Connections forces our hand, frankly. We're going to be in a position to put that on the street. But I just feel like, I don't know, with the improvement we've seen as of late, I don't know that we feel like it's really necessary. I'm going to let Steve Cross talk. He's got his light.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Well, I would echo Director Brown's comments that Waste Connections so far has shown significant improvement. We put a lot of pressure to bear on Waste Connections when they were, I mean, not only daily, but multiple times during the day where we had to talk with them and so forth. They recognized that the manager was not doing the job, and they moved relatively quickly, and they replaced him with Mr. Tucker. We've not had the opportunity to meet Mr. Tucker. He was transitioning, as Director Brown mentioned. He's been in charge of their landfill out there in I guess that's Maryland Heights, I think, or something like that. But anyway, so we will be meeting with him certainly pretty soon here in the new year, and make sure that he understands the city and so forth. But apparently he has put in place some processes and procedures that have certainly improved. The other thing that when we did look before, this is a tough time to be going out for bid. You know, we talked to a couple other vendors, and cost of trucks, getting parts. You know, we were told this is kind of a bad time to be going out for bid. If Waste Connections performance was continuing as it was 6 months ago, there'd be no question in our mind that we would be making the recommendation to move forward and do what we can, because we owe it to the residents. When it became known to the residents that we were looking at potentially making a change, there was a lot of chatter on social media, most of which was, hey, we love Waste Connections. Why are you guys thinking of changing, and so forth? It's in pockets. I mean, we have wards that they just don't have any problems. And there are, and Chair Garetano will say that there's some of the problems seem to be concentrated in Ward 8. Don't know the reason for that, but I think that the number of times that the Chair Garetano has sent emails to Director Brown and I have certainly been reduced. So we're just, Rick and I are here to implement your all's wishes, but we're just updating you. But we're not recommending that we make a change because it is painful. It's painful for the residents to go through that change. We did it with Meridian to Waste Connections. So we're not making the recommendation, but if you all feel differently, if you're getting a lot of feedback from your residents that things are really, really bad, certainly we're prepared to move forward with an RFP if necessary.
I've got Councilmember Edens and then Clark.
The change for trash providers was made right when I came in to my first term. But I remember all the problems and the discussions about implementing the contract before we were ready to implement the contract with Waste Connections for the official start date. So I'm not unaware of the heartburn and the reasons that led to getting this provider in the first place and how bad it was before and how bad the options were. That being said, to echo what Mr. Cross just said, or City Administrator Cross, it is in pockets. So in the northeastern quadrant and in my ward, I maybe have had the amount of complaints on one hand since the contract has started. And I suspect it's because, at least where I live, the collection days are Monday and Tuesday. So I think what happens is they get behind in my ward and then it trickles down to you all and we don't get the complaints because we're at the beginning of the week. That is at least my thought process. So for me, I don't have a great reason to disrupt and go out to bed because my residents seem to be happy, except that I will say, and I do hope they're listening, they have been unprofessional at times with the way they have tried to negotiate with the city. And dare I say two-faced? I don't want to trash talk, but that's how I feel about their business and the way they handled it after they made changes. They didn't start out like that at all. They did not start out like that. So what I'd love to do is I'd like to hear from any council members. I know Ward 8 has an issue and I want to know, is it bad enough still that you want to go out to bed? Because if it is, I'll support you, but I don't have a reason in my ward to rock the boat.
Chair, I'm sorry, Councilmember Edens, if I may, you're absolutely right that a year ago, they were bargaining in bad faith.
Absolutely.
But that was under the previous manager.
Yeah.
And they became aware of that and he was let go. So again, as I mentioned, we've not had the opportunity to meet face to face with Mr. Tucker, but the results are there. And I would clearly the previous manager was not operating the way Waste Connections. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They didn't approach the city. Everything was fine. They brought this gentleman in and he was not a good manager. So he's no longer with them.
Mr. Chair, if I could interject one thing, I apologize. But I do want to remind the commission that when we negotiated the extensions under the contract, we did build in a much longer notice time so that the city would not be in a short-term notice position like we were about a year ago. So that was what resolved in the amendment to the contract that was approved by the city council.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark and then Jaxie.
Well, I look at this data that you've got here, Director Brown, and it's graphing it. It looks very haphazard. So from that, saying that we have significantly improved, I'm not sure about that. It could have been just a fluke or didn't get enough complaints that were noted. I think this is brings up a good point that we need a way to not just say it's in pockets, because that really doesn't, that word pockets doesn't say anything to me unless I see it plotted on a map that shows, because maybe we're just concentrating on those pockets and there's things that are happening other places. And until you plot it, it's hard to see that what's really happening. Maybe there's a trend of some kind. So, of course, I'm always wanting to track things. So, and if we did that, if we had a good complaint system that we log into every complaint that comes in to any of us, to us as council members in emails or telephone calls or calls that come into the city. That way we could know more exactly what is really going on. So from the data that I see here, I don't see that whether they are doing better or if they are, next month it's going to be back up to 30. I don't know. And I don't know, according to the month, maybe it's higher some months than others. So I don't see a reason to jump into it and do an RFP right away, but to wait and get more data and more specific data to give us a better idea.
Okay, Councilmember Jackson.
So to Councilmember Eden's question about experiencing issues elsewhere, I can tell you, I have not had any complaints from any other residents in Ward 6 other than everyone on my street. And by everyone, I mean pretty much everyone on my street. So I think they're just if there's a problem in Ward 6, it's in Bridle Spur. But I do have a question along those lines. Two questions. One, have you received complaints from other Ward 6 residents that maybe I just haven't heard? And then to the recent call that I made, the initial non-pickup was not weather related. In your interactions with the new management, did you get a good feeling for the why there?
Is this relative to your specific street?
Yeah, just
I would have to say, I don't know. I'd have to follow up and report back to you on the specifics there, frankly. I know Michelle typically handles those and we send them on, and I'd have to follow up with her and get back to you.
And I'm comfortable with, especially with you gentlemen saying, you're more impressed with the new management that you've been dealing with. And I'm willing to, as Councilmember Clark suggests, give you more time to gather some more data and see if this is actually a trend and not just, a blip on the radar. So thanks.
If I may, let me clarify. The new management is the manager, okay, who we've not met, we've not communicated with. So the people below him, Linda, and the staff that is dealing directly with the drivers, those are the people that we're dealing with. So we're not dealing with him directly, but all we're saying is that over the last couple months that he has been in this position, the number of complaints have gone down. Now, we have 2 months here of data. So in November, it was only 4, and in December, it was 6 versus 20 and 16 and 30 and so on and so forth, and 61 last February. So 2 months does not necessarily make a trend, okay? But we're just saying that right now, the calls that are coming in from residents are less. The calls that we're getting from council members are less, but we just want to, so this is more just kind of informing, but we don't want to start a process for something that is an involved process. It's a painful process, but we're encouraged. We're cautiously optimistic with the trend that we're seeing with a new manager in there that he's apparently put the word out, take care of Wildwood. That's what we're seeing.
So one of the things that I might follow up with you on in the future, as you're engaging with this new management. I remember a year or two ago when I had a few problems, the answer as to why the trash wasn't picked up, I would throw the yellow flag out on that because it was BS, because I'm the guy that plows my street. So I know whether or not the street's been plowed. So my point is, just please be cognizant of that as you're dealing with them. When they give you a reason, if you believe it to be plausible, I'm in. That's what I'm looking for is, hey, I get it. They're a business, they have problems. Trucks break down. I mean, it happens. I didn't appreciate at the time what I felt was a dishonest answer to a question. So just watch for that for me. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, that phone call I got was, so I need to go.
Okay. Well, I guess I will comment on that because I do have had a lot of experience in this, and I'll share at least my thoughts and insights. And, this topic here, I mean, we go back to the Meridian days. We had different versions of Meridian, because it was changed ownership, but towards the very end, we had a lot of problems back at the time. And so ultimately that led to us looking for a new provider. And we went through a process and ultimately selected who we have today. I think to me, the most important thing is consistency. And that is still something that is to be determined because we have been through this situation. And a year ago at this time, as Councilmember Bertolino alluded to before, they put us in a situation where we had no choice. And ultimately that we had to, right? Because we were basically didn't have the time to go through a process. Now, that could potentially occur again. The communication is another major problem that we've had in the past, and our residents like to receive communication. I think people are very forgiving and very understanding, but they want to know because they don't want to leave the can out in the curb if it's going to sit there for a few days. But if you tell them when, they're fine waiting a whole week. Most are, right? I'm sure there's some that don't, but the fact that the communication is there, and I think that's been very inconsistent as well, though maybe in my personal opinion, a slight improvement lately. But, the city of Eureka had Waste Connection since the year 2005. And as of yesterday, they started with a new contract with Meridian. So something went there that changed that maybe we don't know about, and maybe we will find out at some point. And so, I just feel like, in my opinion, it doesn't hurt to be in the advantage, the point of having options available to us, because if you're the one who has the current contract, then, if we have the opportunity to look elsewhere or do something different, they're either going to have to step up their game and keep it up there. But if we are sitting around and we don't have those options available to us, then, we're stuck with whatever they provide, So I think that to me is why I still lean in the area of, it doesn't hurt to see what our options are. Because I think in Eureka, from what I recall reading in the newspaper, it was the rates went up for them. So they did look at other options. And I don't know if we're going to be in the same boat, and Rick might find out in a couple of weeks, when that renewal notice comes along, because that's what happened a year ago to us. So either we can wait a little bit longer, or at least I think we need to at least keep our options open and think about it there. Lauren, I think you're absolutely right. When it's like, Ward 8 and 7 probably get the most impact because we're at the end of the week. So, usually there's time to get caught up for the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday people. By the time it's us Friday, they kind of just, unless they could do a Saturday, which didn't happen because we had that issue just at Christmas time. Saturday was a holiday, so they just said, well, you're going to have to wait another week. But that's what happens. We always kind of get bumped out almost a week if they can't do it. So, and that, maybe just because of the days there. So I just think that we shouldn't completely dismiss the idea. I think we have to keep our options open. Somebody who's at least willing to sit through this meeting tonight for like 2 hours tells me you're interested. And, maybe we should hear or have a conversation at least, or keep you in mind if you're willing to come and listen. Because I think that matters. And we got to keep our options open. This is a free market. There's choices, and I think we need to keep those options open. And to one thing to Councilmember Clark, we don't have really a good way to know about complaint data because people contact them directly. They're supposed to give us a report. I don't think we've seen that. Initially they told us there was going to be a Saturday call center. They quietly took that away. There are things that to me, I look for a good partner, and there were things that didn't go well in the past. And so that's why I would keep options open. Councilmember Clark.
I agree. We can't get all the data in it, especially if our partner doesn't give it to us. But what we have is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And so we have to use what we have, and we can somewhat see trends from that. And so I would just ask, could we go for a month or two when we plot which day the trash pickup was supposed to be, that the complaint came from, and plot it on a map where it was, and the number of calls that we get.
I think our data is only as good as whoever calls into us. And so
Well,
that's the challenge.
Well, we
is
can
that-
ask the
And
question.
sometimes people go to them directly, so we don't know. I mean, Rick only knows, I think, what we escalate, or if somebody contacts them, but there are many that go unreported, or they go directly to Waste Connections. And, you know, I don't know if they're gonna tell us ever how many they get or what. But Rick, do you want to comment on that, or?
Well, by and large, yes, the data we're giving you is the complaints that we receive. So we don't know exactly how many are going unreported to us and directly to Waste Connections. And hopefully those are getting resolved and it's not a problem. But what we're giving you is just the folks that come to us, in theory, after they've not been satisfactorily handled at Waste Connections, generally speaking.
So maybe, Rick, you know, about a year ago when we were running into a lot of problems, I think you were having some daily communication with them where they would send you maps of, here's the outage for today. Are you still feeling like there's that communication occurring? Like, are you hearing, you know, whether it's like, oh, we didn't finish a street here this week, or is it kind of radio silent?
No, I think we're still receiving feedback, and Linda with Waste Connections, they've kind of held her as our point of contact, and with that in mind. And so she's pretty good at telling us if they do have an issue and providing us information relative to the extent of the miss, so that we're not surprised. So I think that's good. I think they've also, you know, they've been pushing their mobile app, and I think that's been a very positive thing. And I know I've been trying to use it. We push it in my neighborhood. So I think that's been positive. And they've gotten so that they are quick to do the robocall. I guess they've gotten that worked out enough that they're quick to do it if they have a lapse and get the word out. So I think those things seem to be happening, especially with the weather related incidents we had over the last couple of weeks. We really didn't get any complaints at City Hall. I was pretty surprised. So I took that as a positive, frankly.
Well, that's good to know, but I think, you know, we should, you know, at least keep our options open. I think it's going to be evident over the next month what terms we may see for future renewal, right, Rich?
Well, we may very well know something in a month or less than a month. And as I told you, I think what my position is going to be, unless you tell me something more specific, I will start working on the RFP so that we have it ready to go. I don't know that I'm going to put it on the street until I get more direct feedback from you all that we need to do it, but I will have it ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, if there isn't any objection, I think that makes sense. Let's not get caught, you know, just because consistency, you know, if we had better consistency, I would feel better about it, but you know, I feel like we've been through this before, right? Every time it feels like, okay, things are good, something starts to happen. Lauren?
I was just sitting here chuckling because of, now it is possible, right, on Zoom or on YouTube, that there is someone watching from Waste Connections. Probably unlikely, but we do have other interest in the room. That is notable. And I was just thinking about business practices, you know, how unorganized you have to be to not make sure the streets that are taken care of include the people that vote on your contract. Now, we should all be treated the same, but what a lapse of judgment to not take care of the people that write you the check, because you have to think they treat us better than everybody else. That means everybody else is getting even worse treatment, is what I would think. That did not go unnoticed. The other thing that we talked about a couple of years ago that was interesting is when we had Waste Connections come up and we were kind of airing our complaints and dirty laundry, one of the things that became evident in that conversation at the podium was that they did not have the software tracking that we thought they would have to know what routes were missed at any given time. It was dependent on the driver to report it when they came back in, right? So they weren't doing it live. There was no GPS tracking where the driver was. So it was an honesty policy. And a lot of my residents will actually wait and see if somebody comes back the next day before they even report a missed pickup. I have learned that from them. So the data that we get, while I want to get more data and it's important, it may not be particularly reliable because of the way they're collecting their information. It would be nice to know if other companies have a different procedure rather than, some sort of real-time data, knowing where their drivers are at any given moment, knowing what streets are missed and not, because the problem is when you have a relief driver that's not aware of the route, they don't necessarily know that they've missed a street. It may not be, it's not necessarily that somebody's lazy or that they don't care. They don't know what they don't know. So how can you report something you don't know you're responsible for collecting? And that became very apparent to us in the process. Now, the difference is with smaller maneuverable trucks, which I would say are key because I've got rural roads. The difference is before with our previous provider, we had curbs broken in traditional neighborhoods that weren't even rural, things ran over, at least nobody's ran over anything or ruined a curb. So the size of the trucks are appreciated. What that means is they fill up quicker and more trips are necessary to complete a route. That's the trade-off. And that's what we've seen.
Okay. All right. Seeing Councilmember Clark, comment?
I do. Just a quick comment. Maybe instead of what I had suggested before, if we could bring in the manager and ask this new manager directly about getting us better data and better process for taking it.
I think if it's all right, I would ask that Rick or Steve handle that because they haven't yet even had the opportunity to meet with this person, and maybe that's part of their initial conversation.
I guess I was under the impression they had already met with this team.
No, we have not, and we would certainly planning to do that. I'm certainly not opposed to. I don't want to speak for Mr. Cross, but it would seem reasonable to me that they should be able to come and speak to you directly if that's what your desire is, frankly.
So I think maybe just proper protocols, let them first have their initial introduction and then we can do an invite to meet with the committee.
Do you think we could do that before the next meeting so we could know what they said?
I will discuss that with Mr. Cross. I would think that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. So we'll revisit that. So maybe just a motion at this point right now for Rick just to prepare, but not execute yet that RFP, just to have it ready. All right, is there someone who would like to make a motion? Councilmember Jaxie? Oh, Councilmember Hopper, thank you. Sorry about that. And thank you for bringing it to my attention. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks. I think most of what I intended to say has probably been somewhat the dead horse that's been beaten by now, but no, I think at least to agree with Councilmember Jaxie, we definitely have a lot of complaints. Like I said, we had just this last week, we had 2 come in where people were a little frustrated with it. And yeah, we were definitely affected as the same as you were, Chair Garetano, that, they came in and they're like, oh, the weather's bad, we're not showing up. And then it was like, and we're not coming back for a week. And I have some understanding that, it was a holiday weekend, but the next day was also Christmas Eve, not Christmas Day. And, if you're able to deal with inclement weather, I just feel like they should provide some better options. But that being aside, I think overall, I would say that I have, cautiously optimistic that we've seen a slight improvement in service, but I don't think it makes sense for us to just sit around and say like, oh, they've gotten a little better for right now because this new guy's in here. And maybe he's really moving quick to do a good job, but then how long before it falls back off again? And then we're stuck trying to scramble around and figure out how do we get somebody else in here when kind of as we were before, they sort of came out of nowhere and really, you know, put a gun to our head about what we could and couldn't do and where their stance was. And that, to agree with Councilmember Barlino, that has always set very poorly with me, the way they handled that situation too. So I have a number of complaints with Waste Connections, and I feel like they're at a point where they really need to come back to us with a little bit of a more cordial response of we want to work together with you guys and make sure that we're providing good service and we're doing everything we can, and not just basically, honestly, I just feel like most of the time they're just kind of like, well, that's your problem, and then they're done. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I think we had a motion first and a second. Carla, did you get that? Okay. So I think was it Councilmember Jaxie who made the motion and seconded by Councilmember Clark. The motion was just for Rick to prepare the materials for RFP to be determined, I guess, at a future date. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? All right, that motion passes. All right, moving along, then I would say, let's see, we got one more item left under for action here, which is the historic marker for Madison Valley. Rick, I will hand it over to you. Yeah.
I believe.
Oh, wait,
There's another
I
one in there.
skipped
Yes.
over one again, sorry. So we have the draft of a policy on public dedication of private streets. Rick.
So council members, this is a carryover item. As you know, we talked about this at your last meeting. So I was kind of late posting anything to the agenda on this, and I apologize. That was more due to the holiday than anything. But what I wanted to provide at least back to you on this issue at this meeting and at this time was to try to address the issue of the request we've gotten to take over the alleys in the town center area, kind of break that out, because you did make a motion, I think, at the last meeting to move forward with that portion of this discussion. So with that in mind, I provided a hard copy to you as well. And what I've done is essentially to tweak the policy that we have to try to accommodate the alleys in the town center as well as the other existing private streets. So I realize they provided this to you at fairly late notice. If you'd like to just defer any action on it to the next meeting, that would be fine as well. If you have any questions at this time or any comments, certainly I'd be willing to take those as well. Thank you.
Councilman Berlino.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Your statement here that says on item 3, that only existing private streets established prior to the adoption of the policy are eligible, except existing private streets located within the town center. Are there private streets private streets that have been dedicated that also have alleys, and that so they dedicated the streets but not the alleys? Would this automatically put the alleys under the city's jurisdiction? Did I make that really confusing for you?
Yes, I think so. And then the intent here would be to say, it's always been with the existing streets. They had to have been in place prior to the original adoption of our policy. So that dates back to 2001. So the intent was after that point, the city was already platting streets. We were accepting them based on our policies, and they would be accepted into our system accordingly through the planning and zoning process. So this would just add in the clarification that if we do have an existing alley within the town center, and we do obviously have those now, that they would be eligible for adoption. They'd still have to go through this procedure to be adopted, to be accepted, but they would be eligible. There would be no question about that. They would still have to go through all these steps, and that would go ultimately through you and the council as a whole to accept them by ordinance. but they would be clearly eligible. I don't know if I answered your question, to be quite frank.
May I follow up? Yeah, you basically did. I was thinking of Winding Trails. I think it's in one, isn't it? Or no, Windsor Crest, where I think Windsor Crest, we have the streets, but not the alleys right now, right?
So Windsor Crest would be eligible under this. They were, that
Okay, but
subdivision was
they would
platted
have to go
after
through the review process and all that to get the alleys adopted. It wouldn't be automatic because they have their streets already dedicated. Is that what you're saying? They have to go through the process.
They would
for
still
the
have to go
alleys.
through the process, yes.
Okay, thank
And
you.
they would still have to do the petition of the 100% of residents requiring it or approving it.
So Rick, then, what are you thinking then as far as next steps? You want to come back to us, or does it help to move it any quicker? Or what do you think?
Well, if it's your desire, we could split this portion of it out separately and then take it to the full council for approval. If that's your desire, we could get that on the agenda presumably as early as the next
And
meeting,
that would be just the alleys.
just the alleys.
Yeah, I
yes.
think that would make sense. Let's get that going.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, made by Councilmember Evans and Councilmember Clark. Is that a second? Okay, any other discussion on the item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone oppose or abstain? All right, that passes. Then moving on, now the next item we'll move on to is the last for action item, which is the historic marker for Madison Valley. So Rick?
Thank you, Chair Garitano. This item, as you know, was in front of this committee and ultimately went to City Council of the former two meetings of the City Council. And this pertains to the proposed renaming of Old Slave Road to Madison Valley. I think, as you are very aware, there was a bill presented in November to City Council, Bill 2749, which would have renamed Old Slave Road as Madison Valley. The intent there, and I think the recommendation that came to this commission was always to add a historic monument or plaque that would commemorate the history of the name and commemorate Madison's Valley name, the historic linkage to that name, although it wasn't in the bill explicitly. So, Councilmember Clark, I believe that I'm correct saying that you had made the motion to amend the bill. And that was done and presented to the council in December. And John Young at that time had added language in the second section that more explicitly stated the requirement to place that historic monument. I think there was confusion in December relative to the amendment of that bill. And the intent was not to install the plaque on Madison Valley or Old Slave Road, but to install it on public right of way. So presumably it would be somewhere in close proximity on Wild Horse Creek Road. And that was kind of stated more or less in the bill. So I also provided you a copy of the amended bill for your reference as well tonight. So I think the bottom line question is, based on what transpired at council, that it came back to you all again tonight. We need some direction in terms of where to go with this. Is that bill ultimately fine? Does it need to go right back to council? Do you need to amend it again? I think I'm looking for some direction from y'all at this point, quite frankly. I think it's fine. I think it, with the amendment, did what we intended to do and what you all wanted to do, quite frankly. But if not, then we need to hear that from you. So I'll close and turn it over for any questions or comments.
Member Clark.
I'll make a motion. I'll move that we approve the recommendation of Director Brown that to go ahead with the amended bill as it's stated now and change the name of the Old Slave Road to Madison Valley and erect this historic marker to preserve the history behind both Elijah Madison and the Old Slave Road name. I would add that we need to put a time maybe on this so it doesn't happen 5 years from now. I don't know what is recommended by the department, maybe by the end of this year or by the end of, by October. I would have to defer to Director Brown for a time, but I would make that motion.
So we have a motion. Is there anyone that'd like to second it? Councilmember Jaxi? All right, any discussion? Rick, do you want to? Well, I guess we need to get a little bit just a clarity on that time component of it, and so.
As far as the installation of the historic plaque, the intent was that it would be developed through Historic Preservation Commission. So it's difficult for me to give you a firm date, but maybe the other way to approach it would be to make a recommendation that that plaque be installed by the end of the year or something to that effect. And then give that direction to Historic Preservation that you feel that it's urgent. Maybe urgent isn't the word, but it's something that needs to be done within a certain time frame because it's important.
That sounds, that I'm agreeing to
So
that
did you want to modify the motion to include by the end of the year?
by the end of the year.
So if you're modifying it, the second, are you okay with that? Yes, you are. So therefore, we've got that motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
That meeting for lots of reasons was special at council. It was a meeting. And when I talked to the folks that voted to send it back to committee, it mostly was because that there was some confusion and I think there was some consternation when there was an effort to separate the plaque from the name change, and those of us were not okay with that. The only reason I'm saying anything is just as a friendly reminder that I've figured out from being on council, and I know Joe and Dave know this, but you can always do a motion to reconsider, but it has to come from the winning side. I was on the losing side. I couldn't make that motion for you guys, but there is always a way to undo that mistake at that meeting. But it has to come from those reconsidering, not the people that lost the vote. So just keep it in mind for the future.
Councilmember Hopper, you have your hand up. Is that related to this? We can't hear you. You're gonna have to mute.
Sorry, I don't know why when I go off mute. Apologies. Yeah, because I was actually the one that made the motion to kick that back and to review it. And I think there was a little confusion on the intended purpose of that was, we obviously wanted to move forward with the name change, but there was just felt like there was some missing information as far as the sign, like really truly what the cost was going to be and, what was really going to go into that. So I think that's really just where the additional consideration was there to kick back to. So just speaking in favor of this, I would absolutely love to move forward and figure all that out. As a matter of fact, I think the one complaint that had moved it back anyway and made it kind of push the effort to reconsider was resolved anyway. So I absolutely support this getting moved forward and getting taken care of.
All right.
I can-
Any
if-
other discussion?
Chair, if it's okay, the cost issue, I can speak to that if that's something you'd like to hear more about.
Okay.
I don't know if that information was provided to you. I know that question did come up. So Joe Vunish provided some information relative to the previous historic monuments and plaques that were installed on the roadsides. And essentially a one-sided plaque, the ones that were previously installed, and they can be made cheaper. But the ones that they went with cost about $3,900 for the fabrication plus installation. And then apparently they did some that were two-sided because the message was deemed important enough that they wanted to carry it over to the back of the sign. So if we go with the two-sided sign, it's basically twice as expensive, if not a little more. So you're looking close to $8,000 at that point just to fabricate the sign. So it is a little pricey, but they're made of a high quality, and then I think they're intended to last for a good long time.
All right. All right. So no other discussion then. We've got that motion on the floor. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? Right, that motion passes. So that concludes all the 4 action items. And we do have some items not ready for action. We'll see those at the next meeting. And anything under miscellaneous? All right, motion to adjourn, made by Councilmember Jaxi, second by Councilmember Clark. Or, yep, sorry, Councilmember Hopper, I just missed you there. Otherwise I'd give you the second there. All those in favor say aye. All right, anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.